You are listening to WXRWLP Milwaukee on 104.1 FM and on riverwestradio.com everywhere. Now you can also listen by telling your smart speaker to play River West Radio. Support for this program comes from Collectivo Coffee, dedicated to keeping Milwaukee's bike riding community rolling with bike pumps available for use in all Collectivo cafes. More info is available in cafes and at collectivocoffee.com. Welcome to Cinema Fireside. Gabe, thank you so much for calling in. If you're listening live, it is a beautiful evening in Milwaukee. The sun is out. The temperature is moderate. Before getting to the station, we kind of did a walking tour of River West, stopping into some of the venues to say hi, and groups of people gathered in the melancholy twilight inside and outside venues, and it's kind of nice to walk around a couple blocks and just to say hey to people and all of that kind of stuff. So that was pretty cool. And again, listeners, thank you for listening, and Gabe, thank you for calling in. Spring is here. It's getting green. And I remember the last we had two major snowstorms in April, and I remember I think it was the last snowstorm, just walking around the blocks before going home, and it was just really, really, really magical. It was really just being like in a very snowy dream, and I really liked that. And my man is smiling; he's enjoying this little description of past events for sure. It's a quiet night here at the station if you're listening live. Just a real nice, kind of like peaceful setting. Sometimes it's, you have lots of activity, and sometimes you don't, just like the ebb and flow of life. It was super warm in Milwaukee this weekend. We were down working at the lake. It was packed with people. And one of the neat things before getting set to do your business is doing a little bit of reading, going into other worlds. So this weekend I started a John Steinbeck's East of Eden, and I don't like to say, that's a great book, because that's abstract. It doesn't mean anything. Why is it? And I will say that Steinbeck, particularly in East of Eden, that each page is actually meaningful. I don't get into great writers or terms like that, because that's just essentially a marketing ploy. Because believe you me, when they were in a contemporary situation, whether it's films, authors, musicians, or whatever, they were just normal people. Believe you me, Johnny Cash back in the day was a normal person before they made him into a commercial icon. So he was known along with other country acts, but he was not the iconoclast that he is today. He was chosen, like Frank Sinatra, etc., to be these commercial icons, and that's how it works. So when you have lived through generations and you can actually see this happen, it's a trip, because a newer generation is just presented with this as if, wow, man, like when we were presented, like with Jimi Hendrix and so on and so forth, we didn't question it. We were just presented with it. But people back in the day said, oh, yeah, I knew dude when he was just, playing here or there, and he was made into something after that. So anyway, to use the word great is very reductive. And there are a lot of quote-unquote greats that really aren't, If you turned in something like some of Hemingway's stuff, they'd say, what is this? This is like a high school student wrote this stuff. It's certainly not Fitzgerald, where Fitzgerald really has a feeling for the texture of interiority of people's lives. And there's a dreamlike waking magic to his prose, undoubtedly. I think it was last summer I read The Last Tycoon about the film business. Out in Los Angeles, and I think we're in for another reading of The Great Gatsby this summer. And then we need to move on to This Side of Paradise and so on and so forth. I remember getting about halfway through Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, and where did it go? So I'll have to start again. In the evening, I kind of found myself revisiting Julia Phillips' You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again. Her odyssey in 70s Hollywood, predominantly when she is producing Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's a fascinating book. It's a good evening read. I actually got it for free at the library out in the lobby. They have shelves of free books, and you can really sometimes find some wonders. And I like to sign and date those books, so I noted that it was in 2015 that I got it. So I've been probably reading it now for 3 years here and there. In the morning, I may misstate the title, but Walk Through Walls, Marina Abramovic's memoir. I became acquainted with her through the film The Artist is Present, and became curious about her life, and that curiosity is being tempered by obviously indulging in her memoir. So also I started reading, an easy read, an accessible read, is Elmore Leonard's Be Cool, which is a sequel to Get Shorty. Get Shorty is a look inside the Hollywood film business, and Be Cool is look inside the Hollywood music business. And those are great Hollywood films. Oh boy, that word great. And it's qualified by great star presences by John Travolta, Gene Hackman, Danny DeVito, with great, clever writing. And so, yeah, for good Hollywood, I would definitely recommend Get Shorty and Be Cool, and the books as well. Which reminds me of Elmore Leonard, obviously, is in that kind of like contemporary noir vein, especially with those novels. But summer is a great time to read more books. And I actually was reading In a Lonely Place. It was a library book, and I probably have to get a copy of it or something like that, because or no, I gotta re-rent it, because I just lost track of it, had to return it, and it just went by the wayside. So definitely. And so yeah, it was a great reading weekend, great working weekend, writing weekend, with the beautiful people down at the lake. You know, you don't want to be sitting in your living room, you know, as everyone else is out there. You can do two things at once. You can split the difference. Thursday, my colleague took me to see Death of Stalin at the Downer Theater. And, you know, usually, well, how can they make a satire or parody of, this political realm with Stalin? How does that come off? Well, it comes off very well. It worked very well. And it's about power and the vying for power among the upper echelons of the political elite as they, wait in the wings to take over the void that Stalin left. And, one betrays the other. It stars, among others, Steve Buscemi. And it's compelling. It brings forth your interest in that era, that particular situation. So it's a good gateway into these films. Are always make you curious as to what really transpired, what really happened. They pique your interest, and they work not only as a piece of I don't want to use the E word, which for some people it's entertainment. I mean, it sounds crazy. It's like as if the bills in life, in dilemmas, and hopes, and desires, and fears, all guaranteed by life, aren't entertaining enough. I just don't understand how you would artificially seek further acts of entertainment, but whatever. I don't know, maybe your life isn't entertaining enough, and you do have to seek it in the solitude of a theater, something like that, which I don't understand, but everyone's different. We have 8 billion different viewpoints. So, but anyway, and then popcorn was gotten, and I wasn't really paying attention. There's so many different things to think about in life, and usually everything is like, kind of like Wimpy Burger size when you go to the theater, but medium popcorn was gotten, and I was like, damn, man, there's no way we're going to be able to finish this. And I says, well, what's large, man? A grocery bag? I mean, that was crazy. So, yeah, wow. You got to pay attention for sure. But then also Twizzlers were gotten. I think those were basically eaten on the spot. The soda is refreshing. I mean, it was just a treat. So thank you very much, my colleague, for that. What a wonderful night. And obviously, well, not obviously, but going out of the theater, the rains came down and just made our way back to the vehicle, and it was, looking back in retrospect, a very, very, very wonderful evening now that is a resonant and ultimately fading memory as memories fade into the fold of many other memories, but I will ensure that that one is distinguished from others. You must have these compartmentalized situations where you can reflect fondly, continually, and hold those ones special and keep those away from the other ones so it doesn't get all cloudy and misty and so on and so forth. Gabe, I'm going to get to you in a moment here. Hollywood 360, I used to win on that show. I didn't try to because I'm not into that stuff at all. I'd just be laying on my back in the dead of night trying to get to sleep, and they'd play clips from films, and I'd be like, man, I know that, and I'd quick just dial in, and I ended up winning 5 times across the country, and one of those times they sent me a Twilight Zone radio drama CD set. So that's actually, these last few nights have been what I've been falling asleep to, is the Twilight Zone radio dramas. And so thanks Carl Amari and crew and all of that stuff for having your show, and that was probably a couple years ago when all of that stuff went down. Then it went off the air in Milwaukee, but it's broadcast from Los Angeles to New York and all points in between, except maybe here. Who knows? So yeah, great stuff. And Gabe, man, I'm about to turn on the phone. How you doing, my man?
Excellent.
Good.
Excellent.
Good.
Mark, yeah, it's always good to hear you give an unscripted, unscrupulous take on whatever's passing through your mind. And, I like hearing the deconstructionalization of our quote-unquote heroes, just the idea of greatness, the idea of these great things, because at times there are certain things, there are certain entertainers, entertainments, disciplines, things that are, to a certain esteem, like this is just undoubtedly great. There's a certain discipline, there's a certain artistic trueness that is sort of above and beyond, where there's a certain ethos that's universal but also individual, where there are great writers, there are great tap dancers, but that word, the construct, the mythos of the idea of greatness, culturally appropriated greatness, where it's sort of corporate, where it's almost like Starbucks. That is very much the idea of buying a T-shirt. And I'm glad you brought up like Jimi Hendrix. Bob Marley would fall in that category for sure. When you look at like how something that actually stood for something has become something so inversely corporate from its original inception and its original point, that the greatness is stripped and commodified and turned into like a Sears brand refrigerator, and stamped on everything to the point where there is like no greatness left in its appropriated form. But that original content may still, in fact, be great. So that word, great, is a strange word. It's a word that I'm glad you bring up, because at times there is no other adjective to use. Sometimes when you see a film or read a book, experience a symphony, or you just listen to a piece of music, the word great, exceptional, extraordinary, must be used to signify that it just stands out. It deserves mention. But yeah, I think to just throw that around like, oh, this is a great film, this is a great film, that's a great film, this is a great book, that's a great book, this is a great restaurant, that's a great restaurant. It just gets to the point where it can be overwhelming, especially in our hyper over accelerated culture. So thank you for definitely weighing in on that.
Thank you, Gabe.
Yeah, good stuff, Mark. The Death of Stalin. I didn't mention. I did watch that a couple months ago. I wrote it down, and I wrote probably about a half page on that one. And I do keep a notebook. In your honor, Mark, about a year or so ago, I started writing down. I started keeping a full-time film journal again.
Ooh, congratulations, man.
Yeah, I kept one back in 2012 when I first moved down to Florida, and then somehow along the way I just stopped keeping one, and then I started again, just to sort of keep my thoughts together for the show a little bit, just to keep, and all it is based most of the time is just a marker of, most of the times it's literally 2 lines in a notebook of just the films I've watched over the last week, but occasionally a film warrants being written about in long form. In longhand. Death of Stalin definitely got a half-page treatment. Not most movies don't get written about. Even when I would say like a great film or a very, very good film or something that I find exceptionally morally abhorrent. Ready Player One got a half page because I just found it so completely offensive in so many ways. Nothing to do with with sexism or racism or anything like that. I just found it artistically offensive. And, I think the last film before that I'd written about really, really at length was Brawl in Cell 99 with Vince Vaughn, which is one of those great genre films that just excels beyond its means and its structure and turns into another form of entertainment altogether.
Yeah, dude, I'm glad that you mentioned that. I have to check that out because I'll tell you why, Gabe, is that, again, like I say, it would behoove one to operate with a sense of discretion because, you're putting your whole evening into a film. So I do, because of your solid recommendation, I do look forward to seeing that, Gabe.
Yeah, and Mark, keep in mind too that there is something very basely there is something purposely bland about the way that it's shot. It's economical. It's shot on digital. It seems to be a very well-structured, small, crude film where everyone does their job and they sort of do the jobs of more than what they're paid to do. Like there might be someone who's a set rigger, but also does some of the grip work and, just they're striving to make their budget. And because they have such a competent crew and they're so passionate about doing what they believe in and they're confident in this film achieving what it can achieve, that the film ultimately works. It is one of those films that's very loudly and obviously shot on digital, like that ultra digital. It's just so crisp. It's so clean. And the fact that it's a gritty film about these gritty surroundings, at times I was sort of like looking at these surroundings, wishing it had like the grain of film or wishing it had been shot on 16 millimeter. Because it really would have suited that environment, especially the locations that it was shot on, the lighting, the mood of the film, the fact that it's a film that's specifically philosophical, but never indulges in philosophy, never indulges in pretense. It's a film that is so straightforward. It really is very similar to the rugged machismo individualist cinema of the late 60s and early 70s, films like stuff directed by Sam Peckinpah, Don Siegel, where the lack of dialogue, the lack of pretense, the lack of explanation says more about just the base actions of what the main character is doing. You are reading a novel on screen without the structure of the novel. You're watching the novel. So many films that I watch, it's like the dialogue is telling you what to think. The dialogue is informing you of what the characters are thinking. And sometimes if it's a dialogue-driven film where it's more like a play, that can be a great thing. But in an action film where restraint is the artistic quality, it's the unspoken vulnerability. It's everything that's unspoken that allows the brutality, the action, the whims of the characters and of the entire scenario to unfold. It creates a believability that otherwise it would just be another routine genre exercise. The pacing, the fluency, and the flow of that film, it's a standout action film. A.O. Scott gave it his critics' pick when it came out. And at the time when I first read the review of it, reading a summary of that film, you would think, okay, this is probably a smart, above-average, gritty action film. I have no need to run out and see this film. But when I saw that critics' pick, A.O. Scott in the New York Times, I was like, okay, here's a review that I'm going to pay attention to. And his enthusiasm for that film, A.O. Scott's enthusiasm for a film stands out more to me than Manohla Dargis's enthusiasm.
Why is that?
She tends to fall for films that sort of have this postmodern quality to them, where they have something that's a loud gimmick, where there's something that's sort of where she falls for art films that are very loudly art films.
Okay.
That are less genre films and less disreputable films, that are more films that really want to be taken seriously as art films, as exercises in serious cinema. Films that are for quote-unquote discerning viewers. She has good taste. She's a critic for the New York Times. I mean, that in itself says something. But I remember like when The Witch came out, she had this like clamoring review, like this is one of the greatest horror films I've ever seen. And I'll never forget you and I seeing that movie in the theater and just being very aware of the fact that we're watching a well-made film that's very intentionally made, and just walking out of the theater looking at each other like, so that's the film that's being clamored as one of the best horror films in a decade. Okay.
Yeah, and I want to say, when people come to me very enthusiastically about it, I don't, like put them up against a brick wall. I just, I allow for the enthusiasm to continue and just don't break it to them like, man, what are you,
what are you talking about?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I'll never forget the father's overacting in that really just took you out of it.
So this week, Mark, the sun's out. I got a garden planted today, which I was very happy about. I rented a tiller. I tilled my garden plot. It was two full plots. We got it tilled. We got it weeded. We got we got produce in there. We got Brussels sprouts. We got zucchini. We got squash. We got 2 kinds of tomatoes. We got peppers. We got 2 kinds of onions. We got life going on there. And then we had to sit there and water the garden because we didn't have a sprinkler. And I'll tell you, that was more enjoyable than watching a film, than any film I've seen in a long time.
Were you out in the sun?
Oh, yeah. But, you got to be careful. You put sunblock on. But, man, the amount of accomplishment I felt on my day off of getting that done, and on low sleep, too. I had my uncle in town this week. That in itself, it reminds me of some of these sort of utilitarian films that were kind of made by Italian post-neorealists in the 1970s, people that were very influenced by De Sica and there's a number of other filmmakers, and their names just sort of leave me. The guy that directed the Battle of Algiers,
all of those, that crew.
Yeah. But there's a film in particular called The Tree of Wooden Clogs, that came out in 1978, and it's just a methodical film that doesn't have much dialogue, about a farmer working on a farm in 1902 whose son loses his shoes in a stream, and he has to make a decision to chop down a tree on the land of the man that owns the land upon whom he works in order to carpent a pair of shoes for his son. And the film is just him doing his chores, doing his work, and existing in 1902 and sort of interacting with his family in these very short, very curt exchanges, and throughout the day and throughout the week, taking time aside instead of eating or instead of doing his normal routine to make these shoes for his son that may ultimately cause him to get fired from his job, but his son needs his shoes in order to go to school. The film just kept coming through my mind today as I was looking at the sun sort of bleeding through the trees, blowing in the wind, as I sat down on the grass and just listened to the wind blow, and was sitting there watering this plot of land and listening to the water trickle and watching it go from spot to spot, and realizing that I should have raked the land more after I was done tilling it, and realizing that I had different terraces of land in certain areas. So there's a plot of tomatoes that I'm going to have to either replant or move around because they're up a full hill higher, like in terms of plant language, they're 2 plants higher than the other plants. And I was like, oh man, in the excitement of planting, I didn't realize it at the time, but once you coat the land with water, and this movie came back to me. I saw it probably 14, 15 years ago on this beautiful Criterion Collection remastered edition. The film had been largely unseen for about 20 years until they remastered it, and it had won the Golden Palm at the Cannes Film Festival in 1978, lauded at its time, and then largely forgotten about. One of those movies that you run across at the library, and you can either walk past it and you'll never see it, or you can take a chance on a film and rent it. I always encourage people to rent films from their local library that they have never heard of before, that have interesting titles, that are from decades past, that are on film labels that they don't recognize, that star no actors with names that they recognize, a director that they don't recognize, in a country that they've never watched a film from before, or rarely watch a film from. You will probably run into some serious gems that will affect you and will stay with you for a long time.
Wow. I'll have to get down to the East Side Library then. No,
yeah.
They've got a good section down there, so.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're going to run into some good stuff. I know some people have, even film people, at times they have an aversion to black and white. They have an aversion to silent cinema. They have an aversion to foreign, some people have an aversion to subtitles. And those are all very fair statements and opinions to have. I've really taught myself to not consider someone stupid when they say that to me anymore. It's taken work. It's taken some empathy. It's taken some definite.
That's actually funny. Thank you, Gabe. And I know you're being serious. A dude saying it's taken work and empathy for people who don't read subtitles. Yeah, no, I'm finding the humor in it, but I do respect what you're saying.
Well, because it's like when people tell you, because the most common statement that people say when they talk about not wanting to watch subtitles in films is saying, I don't want to read when I'm watching a film. Reading is such a laborious, awful chore that is so averse to their lifestyle that they can't possibly be bothered and strained to read. That would not be what they associate with watching a film where they actually have to think, because They don't want to think when they watch a film. And ultimately, when people say that comment to me, and some very intelligent people say that to me, people that have careers where they have read much more content and have done things with it and made a lot of money from it, or have spent, they work 70-hour work weeks, and they get the job done. They pay off their mortgages. They send their kids to good schools. They take care of their cars. They take care of their homes. Their kids get sent off to good colleges because of this. And they read and they use the English, whatever language. They use the English language. They use German. They use Japanese. A whole cacophony of languages and governments to do their job. And then in their free time, watching a movie, it's like Avengers time. It is Grey's Anatomy time. It is television time. It is not thinking about our collective humanity. It is not a time to grow in terms of understanding more stories about the human condition. And in that regard, the film has been split. The film as a concept in our contemporary age has been split into two categories. There are films that are serious works of art or that are serious things for a discerning audience, and then there are films that are for the directly and resolutely undiscerning audience. And that audience is getting larger and larger and more oppressive and less discerning every single year, and it encompasses more and more space, and it takes away more and more people that have been in the discerning film category, maybe not all the time, maybe part of the time, but eventually its ability to intoxicate and grip, because there is so much to choose from, and there is so much, because once you go into it, there's just options upon options. Like, you can stay here in that pink cloud. You don't have to go back to the challenge, the world where you read challenging books instead of, young adult fiction about werewolves and vampires and teenagers and high school and Dean Koontz and James Patterson and things that are not really books. They technically are books, but that is not literature that's going to make an effect on your human condition.
Right. I've actually attempted to read a Dan Brown book. I got about a page or two in, and it was like, I just can't do this. And that Dean Koontz character, I was kind of snookered into reading one of his novels. I could only make it. I had to slog halfway through, and then it was like, man, that's enough of that. But I will say, some of these cats, when they write short stories like Stephen King and Dean Koontz, then it becomes a different form. They become a far more essential author, and it's actually palatable. And I also want to correct something, too. It's never about judging other people, Gabe, because it's not about judging other people. It's protecting yourself from the imposition of other people. So no one's knocking people whether they like subtitles or not. It's just that each one knows what we like, and we just don't want someone else putting their jive onto us.
Agenda.
That's all.
Agenda.
That's all it is. So it's not about judgment. It's about, hey man, I'm just not going down that route.
Well, and it just requires empathy, because really what it comes down to is that most people don't care about the impact that a film or a novel or a piece of writing or a work of art can have on us collectively as a species. They don't care about how these things as a whole really can impact and change the way we look at each other, because a lot of the times these art forms are now looked at more as entertainment than ever. In the silent film era, it literally was a fact that a film, a wide released film, could change the public viewpoint on an issue. At times it did. If you look at The Birth of a Nation, singularly responsible for bringing back the second wave of the Ku Klux Klan. The fact that people went to films and they saw the same films. They saw people in large groups across vast cities that did not communicate with each other except for telegram or maybe telephone and letters and more old-fashioned forms of communication, where groups of people were collected but isolated to a degree. we're watching these movies in the same flow where, and maybe certain films would travel at different speeds around the country, but people would watch these films like there'd be a movie in this theater this week and it would come and go. And up until about 1944, 45, a large portion of the country saw all of the same entertainment at the same rate as everyone else. So there was sort of the ability for a film to be, I guess, unimportant, even a film that was about an important issue. The ability for it to just be another film was a very prominent thing. But if a film stood out as something really important, it's different than it is today, where a film can be an important film about an important issue. I think that I'm trying to think of the last time I can think of a film that really was, that I can think of as important. And Schindler's List comes to mind in terms of a film that actually had an impact on a large group of people that saw it. The thing is, though, is that Schindler's List wasn't a widely seen film when it came out. Compared to Steven Spielberg's other film that year, Jurassic Park, I don't think Schindler's List even broke $100 million. I don't think it broke even $75 million. So, that's not like a hugely widely seen film in the context of how we think today of a widely seen film. A movie like The Best Years of Our Lives is a film that really changed the dialogue about PTSD and about the veterans that came home, because it was a film that talked about the issues that really were troubling and difficult to talk about, and a film that literally was talking about those things. That film may seem stagey or a little bit and very, dated or a little bit stodgy and very stiff today, but in its time, that film was momentous. That film was received with such grace and warmth and love, not only by GIs, but by families of GIs, because the war had such an impact on so much of the country and so much of the world, that a film that actually spoke about things that were not being loudly spoke about, and it spoke about in the way that people were talking, too, quietly, with restraint, sort of between the lines, it has an impact that you just don't see in a lot of contemporary films. So film being divided up into these two camps, when you have crossover, I really appreciate it when a mainstream film that's widely seen by a large group or that's meant to be seen by a large group of people can surprisingly be really just brilliant, smart, loaded with content, loaded with worthwhileness. I don't know. It happens every once in a while where I'll watch something that's clearly meant for big cinema, big Hollywood, and unnecessarily, and I say this because it is not necessary for big Hollywood films or mainstream films to be good. They sort of pass a base test where film critics give it like a mark of 3 out of 4 stars, and that's all that it needs to get a positive rating on Rotten Tomatoes, so that people will be like, oh, this gets a positive or a certified fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes because 75% of esteemed critics gave it 2.5 or 3 stars out of 4, so it's not a horrible film. So I can literally pat myself on the back to go see Blockers with John Cena, or I can go see Game Night. I can go see a disposable comedy that has sort of this postmodern repartee, sitcom dialogue, these sort of wacky post-Judd Apatow improvised scenarios where the film is just a carbon copy of a carbon copy of a carbon copy, and maybe has like 10 minutes of social commentary edited into it, where they finally figured out a way to edit it in where it wasn't completely tasteless or it actually flowed into the movie somehow. Highly constructed Hollywood films where they have the budget and the time and the resources to shoot these films, reshoot these films, test them, retest them, re-edit them, reshoot. A producer comes in and edits them. Maybe they bring in another editor even. They test them some more. They look for the audience score ratings. They maybe even bring in some critics who are unpaid, some other screenwriters to come in. and watch the film and say, hey, what can be taken out of this film to actually make it a stronger film so it'll be well-reviewed so that when it comes out, we get a good Rotten Tomatoes score? How do we make a technically a likely to be well-reviewed film? That is the modern formula for a modern Hollywood film. So you have these films that fall into this middle territory where they're not quite exceptional. They don't take huge risks. They don't fall on their face. They're not like absurdly bad or absurdly great. There's just a lot of very passable material, and then there's still there's still this huge wave of content that's just bad. Always been that way. It'll always be that way. The majority of cinema, of movies, of books, of music that comes out will always be mostly just bad. And that's my opinion. I'm not saying that everyone can sit down and take a test and say, is this a good piece of music? Is that a bad piece of music? Is this a great piece of music? Is that a bad piece of music?
Well, Gabe, get your breath. I think this is a key critical moment where I will intervene. Get your breath. I don't want you falling flat on your back on the sidewalk, man. For God forbid. It's a beautiful evening, and my God. I want to say this too is that I saw Get Out, and I enjoyed the fact that you could. First of all, again, I mean, it's important sociologically, but it's over inflated on the other hand. But as for the writing, I love the conceit about, and if you haven't seen the film, plug your ears now. You have your chance, and about that the people get hypnotized and so on and so forth, and then you with that narrative device, you can build around it. Someone recognizes someone from off the block, so on and so forth. Oh, what's happening? And so in a writerly context, I think that it's a good film. Like if someone would give you that idea, you could really, that basic conceit that it's presented in Get Out, you could run with that, whatever the actual content you would choose. So yeah, I think that it's, and a lot of films are more existential, that you really don't have a grasp on the backbone of the actual story. And with something like that, there's something that the events can cling to, this greater singular idea. So that's what I took away from that film. And tomorrow night at the university, there's going to be well over 100 pizzas, man, and as well as soda pop, and that's Zen in the Art of Filmmaking. We should have had Mr. Tate Bunker as a guest, man.
Well, Tate Bunker is a busy man. He's trying to save the soccer field over by COA. He just launched a campaign, a campaign to help save that soccer field right next to Reservoir Park, that side field where lots of people, lots of community teams play soccer. There's lots of kids that play soccer there. There's lots of youth soccer that happens over there. There's adult soccer leagues that play soccer there. And, he's a busy filmmaker. He's a busy film professor. He's an interesting human being. He does good stuff. He's a continual inspiration. I'd love to have him on sometime, Mark. That'd be super cool.
Yeah, tonight would have been the optimal occasion to have him on, but that's now in retrospect, because I just realized that, oh man, he would have been. He's very well spoken. He's very serious about his craft, and that determination pays off up on the screen. Now, I want to say that I did work with him on a film, and we were in this small town in Wisconsin, and we were in this, it was almost like a set, almost like this hardware store, this general store, and on a Saturday it was really, really fun just to watch the real people come in, the customers and so forth, and that's Tate Bunker's film Depth of Field.
I haven't seen that yet, but Yellow Light is a film I really enjoyed. That was an earlier short film of his that is experimental in the best sense of the word. I think There used to be a copy of it at River West Film and Video. If there isn't anymore,
Actually, my man, there may be, because I think I came across. Well, I know I came across the Tate Bunker film on the shelf, so it may be here, my man.
It's probably Yellow Light. That was a very well received film of his. Yeah, he's got a good knack for that sense of America, that sort of Robert Frank, real small town America. Norman, almost like Rockwellian. He really has a love and an understanding of things in their texture and their appearance, and not only that, but nature as well. And his ability to infuse that with these experimental visuals, it just sort of flows and forms. And his movies have a contour and a shape all their own, where he's being playful, but he's also being very serious. And you just make up your own mind about what his films are about. And I find his work very refreshing. Really cool experimental filmmaking. Some of the better, in that it has form and structure, which I always appreciate, that it's not just a bunch of random like psychedelic druggy stuff thrown at the screen and like, oh, look at this technique, look at this technique, look at this bombardment of light. That stuff has its moments and has its place, but man, to hold up for a feature film, there's not a lot of filmmakers that can do something like that and make it last and make it meaningful, where that can hold up for the whole film. I'm thinking, I can't remember the filmmaker's name. It's gonna tick me off. I'll talk about him next week. But The Forbidden Room is a film that is like the rare, truly psychedelic film that somehow bafflingly manages to just be a bombardment of light and fury and images and insanity, and somehow it actually works, where it doesn't fall apart under the weight of its own chaos. Enter the Void is another film that just sort of has this underlying vision where the chaos, it doesn't succumb to just total and complete chaos and ineptitude, where it's teetering on the brink of for long stretches of that film, but it never goes too far. And considering that it's a film about life, death, and DMT, that's an accomplishment.
Yeah,
but, I'm sorry, Mark. Go ahead.
No, not at all. I just want to say, because I initially had spoke about the emptiness of our of the interior right here, and it's starting to fill up with people. We have guys from the if you're listening live from the other show, Screens, coming in, and with a special guest, and then I've got a couple colleagues here as well. So it's now so it's nice, man. It's just that sense of coziness. The light is dimmed on the street. It's still light out, but there's no golden sunlight anymore. And I just wanted to throw that in, Gabe, as you what's happening over this here, and if you're listening live.
So, Mark, I've been I'm on two missions right now. One is to get some more films from 1967 viewed, so I can really dive into Mark Harris's book, Pictures at a Revolution, which is about the 5 films nominated for Best Picture in 1967 and their cultural effect, which is a great book. I've read about, I'd say about a fifth of it, and I just decided, even though I know what Dr. Dolittle from 1967 is, I should probably watch the whole film. I tried to watch it one time and I turned it off halfway because I was like, this is, even for cultural studies, this is insulting. I was at a point where I was like, I get what the failings of the studio system in 67 is an important year for understanding where the archaic limitations of the former studio system ended and where the new Hollywood begins. Mm-hmm. And you have some uncomfortable divisions, and you have the remnants of the old type of producing and the new school of production and of filmmaking, where you have people like, what's his name? Who's the guy that made The Last Detail and Shampoo?
Hal Ashby.
Hal Ashby, where you have like the Hal Ashby school of filmmaking and that type of production. Easy Rider, The Hired Hand, movies, hippie westerns, where you have movies like McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Robert Altman, Sidney Lumet, even early Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Francis Ford Coppola, and the remnants of the older style of filmmaking are still present in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, Dr. Dolittle, and then you also have this new type of cinema like The Graduate, and In the Heat of the Night, films that have a louder, more pronounced type of cinematography, utilizing newer, more daring, more European styles and techniques, and a more free form of acting, where in the 50s you're experimenting with this new type of acting, but the filmmaking doesn't quite equate to the to this new type of emotional verbosity. Elia Kazan never went full out experimental. He always had restraint and form, and he always was a classicist, where he made his films very much of the style between the golden age and the silver age of Hollywood, with this very structured, very straightforward, very mannered and very catered form of filmmaking, where he just basically allowed the film to be framed and allowed it to be lit well, almost like not a great play, but a nice play, and allowed these performances to come out. And that's what makes Elia Kazan's films great. And there's that word again. But that's what allows some Elia Kazan films to really elevate to greatness, is the fact that he doesn't direct them over too much. He doesn't over-direct his films. He allows them this grace. And that can work to a point, but most directors don't have that Elia Kazan quality. So when you allow people, especially in the late 60s, early 70s, when drugs and new types of thinking, new types of artistic consciousness are coming into the fold, you have some really bold experiments, and that's the key word: visual, narrative, and artistic experiments. And you have things like Nashville from 75, and you have McCabe and Mrs. Miller from 71, which are both Robert Altman films. And, revisiting Nashville the other day, which I am so glad that I did, Nashville is widely regarded as one of these like really exceptional, really amazing American films, one of the great films of the 1970s. And I'm rewatching it, and in some ways I'm looking at it as trying to imagine it in its time as a film that had never been made before, and to a wide mass audience in the 1970s, especially just a mainstream audience that had not seen large bodies of European art films. This idea of having 20 or 25 sort of somewhat main characters floating in and out of the frame, coming and going, kind of interacting with each other, bumping into each other, having little exchanges of dialogue. A character that was sort of in the forefront in the beginning fades out and then comes back near the end, and it turns out this character is married to this character. As I'm watching the film and pausing it and just sitting there thinking about it, I'm like, this is a great revamping and restructuring of the classic American melodrama. Altman is looking at the outline, the pretext of what made the films of the 1940s and the 1950s, these sort of Douglas Sirkian soap operas, and he's taking the elements of it on an outline. It's like, okay, this is the technicalities of what these characters do and where they go and what their interactions are. Now we have these characters that are available to us. Let's see randomly how we can have them interact, because we have 20 to 25 somewhat main characters, some of whom have dialogue, some of whom don't have any dialogue in the film, but are still presences, are still characters, are still alive. Jeff Goldblum is the prime example. He doesn't have a line of dialogue in the film, but he is the most memorable character that comes and goes on his tricycle motorcycle.
Yeah, that's a good film. That definitely.
Yeah,
and I want to say, Gabe, we got to act as our night is coming to a close here.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to say that for anyone that hasn't seen Robert Altman's Nashville from 1975, do yourself a favor, find a copy of it. It's not a perfect art film. It's not a perfect mainstream film. But as I was going off on that rant earlier about that line between mainstream mores and sort of artistic avant-garde experimentation, Nashville is a really good film that entertains and enlightens at the same time and doesn't quite leave a singular vision of one or the other. It works on both levels. It's an amazing film. It's an entertaining film. And it's just another one of Robert Altman's exceptional works of cinema, among many.
Thank you, my man. And Gabe, I want to wish you nothing but the best of all good nights.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you to all our listeners. Thank you to everyone, and we'll see you. Have a good night.
See you, my man, and thank you. I really appreciate Gabe's presence. I'd go bonkers trying to do an hour of that, but Gabe his mind is very sharp, very precise, very fact-filled. He's got a great memory, and he uses it wisely. Therefore, he can run for an hour. I can't. Everyone is different in life, for sure. He was mentioning Hal Ashby and Robert Altman. I actually ran into Dennis Hopper and Danny Trejo and James Caan out in Las Vegas when Hopper had his Sin of Vegas. And that's where I picked up the Hal Ashby book. I think the author was there, and I was there with for Frankie Latina. So that Hal Ashby book, I have the memory from back then. I'm in the middle of reading it, as well as the Robert Altman book I got some years ago when it came out, and so I'm enjoying both of those. I just, in a sense, they both kind of have this existential terrain going on as filmmakers, so I'm enjoying reading both their books at the same time as they share that sort of 70s commonality of more of a free-form exploration of the narrative form, for sure. Robert Altman definitely has some great films like there we use that word great again, or films of interest such as The Long Goodbye and, as Gabe pointed out, Nashville. But I think one that I definitely going to return to is Altman's 72 offering, Images, which is kind of like maybe potentially an homage to Bergman's Persona. So yeah, Images is something definitely I want to revisit. I have yet to see, I think, Ashby's The Landlord. I think that's either Jeff Bridges or Bo Bridges, so I've got to get that, order that from the library for sure. And as I said, I started this journey alone, and now the stage is being filled, and Martin Hallinger enters the scene as well. He loves radio, and he helps keep this whole thing going, and I cannot wait to read a little bit tonight and then pass out to a radio drama. It's just so fun, and hopefully look forward to some fairly solid sleep. And as I wrap up the show and do all my technical wrap up here for the show, I do have a number of colleagues that will engage in arbitrary tracks of conversation, and it's very cozy. I'm very appreciative for their presence because they have a fireplace vitality. It's like being around the fireplace of human experience. So within seconds, I'm about to experience that. Thanks for listening, guys. We will be on at the same time next week on WXRWLP 104.1 FM Milwaukee. To hear past episodes, visit riverwestradio.com/shows and click Cinema Fireside.